Everybody out here already measuring the parade route for LeBron James, Joel Embiid, Jaylen Brown, Tyrese Maxey, and VJ Edgecombe, one of the most star-studded starting fives the league's seen in years. But before you get too comfortable, some of the same people who celebrated the signing just quietly told you it might not work.
It says, no one on this team can have an ego.
That's Tyrese Maxey, on the record about his own roster. That's not panic, but it's a pretty clear warning that chemistry could matter as much as talent.
In the last 9 years, you know how many times LeBron's teams have gone over 50.5?
Last 9 years, that's interesting. How many?
Last 9?
So basically the Laker year and the last year in Cleveland. Laker tenure in the last year in Cleveland.
What, once?
Twice.
No.
Once was 52.
Brian Windhorst said that, and he's not calling for a disaster. He's calling for about 48 wins. So drop your number in the comments right now. How many games do you think this Sixers team actually wins? We'll circle back to it.
I wanted to work. I don't think it's going to work.
That's Iman Shumpert, a former teammate of LeBron's in Cleveland, sitting right next to Shaquille O'Neal on Shaq's own podcast, landing on the same doubt as an ESPN insider without ever comparing notes. When a respected reporter and a former teammate arrive at similar concerns from completely different angles, it's at least worth paying attention.
And I wrote, good luck with that.
That's Dreamers Pro host Charles Sands reacting to Maxey's no ego plea. Fair reaction, because let's be real about who's actually walking into that locker room. LeBron James, a guy who's been the primary offensive engine for virtually his entire career, going back to Cleveland with Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love, through Miami with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh, through the Lakers with Anthony Davis, Joel Embiid, an MVP who's used to the offense running through the post, Jaylen Brown, who just won a championship in Boston playing alongside Jason Tatum, getting fed the ball in isolation with the clock running down, and Maxey, who spent the last 2 years carrying a much bigger offensive load after Embiid's injuries and James Harden's exit forced him into that role. 4 established offensive stars, all of whom know how to be the guy, now sharing one basketball, plus VJ Edgecombe as the young 5th starter still learning how to fit around them, more of a catch and shoot and defense piece than another guy demanding touches, which is actually a point in this roster's favor rather than against it. Sands is a commentator, not an insider like Windhorst, but he flagged the same fault line before the season even tipped, on a franchise that hasn't lifted the Larry O'Brien trophy since 1983 and is done waiting patiently.
I'm changing my mind. I'm going over.
Tim McMahon flip-flopped live on air, going from under to over on the Sixers' win total in real time. And honestly, it says everything about how split the room actually is on this team. Even Vince Goodwill, sitting right there, wouldn't fully commit either way, pointing out this was already a 45-win team last season, and now it's adding LeBron and Jaylen Brown on top of that. But Windhorst wasn't budging, and he had more than one stat loaded up. Miami started 9-18 back in 2010 before that Heatles core figured it out. Cleveland's second stint started 19-20 with Kyrie and Kevin Love still learning each other. The Lakers are the outlier. They actually opened 20-13 in year 1 before a groin injury to LeBron and a wave of other injuries buried the season. So the pattern isn't identical across all 3 stops, but Windhorst's real point stands. New LeBron teams don't automatically become finished products overnight. Now stack a brand new team with 4 established offensive stars still learning to share the ball, coached by Nick Nurse, a guy who's won a title before in Toronto but has never had this many established scores to juggle at once, on top of that history, and Windhorst landing on 48 wins instead of a championship coronation stops sounding cynical and starts sounding like basic math.
Yep. It's too many egos. 3 or 4 people are going to have to say, all right, you go.
If I may.
That's the big podcast panel, and this is where the story turns, because now it's not just ESPN heads with a stat sheet. This is guys who've actually played the game, guys who watched Kevin Love go from a 26-12 superstar in Minnesota to a much lower usage 3rd option in Cleveland, and watched Dwayne Wade accept a reduced offensive role in Miami while the Big 3 sorted out their hierarchy, pointing at the exact same problem from a completely different angle: chemistry, not numbers. Somebody will eventually have to adjust their role. The real question is how much sacrifice each of these stars is actually willing to make, and whether Nick Nurse can stagger their touches enough that nobody feels like they're giving something up. It's the same question every star-stacked roster has had to answer since the first Superteam era, and not every version of that experiment has ended the same way.
My only question, guys, is how many games are LeBron James and Joel Embiid going to play and play together?
Vince Goodwill dropped the real landmine there. Forget wins for a second. This team's whole ceiling depends on two guys with real injury histories being on the floor at the same time long enough to actually build chemistry. LeBron's 41, entering his 24th season, older than Michael Jordan was in his final year with the Wizards. Embiid's availability has been a real concern for years. Just 39 games in 2023-24 and only 19 games the season after that, with a second knee surgery in between. And LeBron signed this 2-year veteran minimum deal after publicly saying he believed he could help turn Philadelphia into a championship team, taking a pay cut most stars his age would never even consider. There's no time to waste a season figuring out fit on what could be one of his final championship runs. If the slow start Windhorst is describing eats into November and December the way it did in Miami and Cleveland, that's a real chunk of the runway gone on a clock that isn't getting any longer, no matter how many national TV games the schedule makers stack on Philly this year.
That at one point or another this year, someone will stand up and say on TV, the Philadelphia 76ers don't have enough help.
Charles Sands is calling his own shot here. When expectations get this high, every early loss is going to trigger the same questions. Is it Nick Nurse's rotations? Is it Embiid's workload? Is it Maxey's role? Is the fit actually working? It's happened enough times across LeBron's career, in Miami, in Cleveland, in Los Angeles, that the pattern is worth watching for again, even if it's not guaranteed to repeat exactly the same way. And when the questions start, expect the fan base to debate every possession, every rotation, and every role, while the rest of the league, from Boston to Milwaukee to New York, just watches to see whether Philly's fault lines actually crack under a spotlight this big. Philadelphia's last great star experiment, the Embiid-led core that never got past the second round, produced plenty of playoff drama, but no championship. Nobody's saying history repeats exactly, but Philly fans have earned the right to be nervous about hype outrunning results. So here's where this actually lands. On paper, Philly's got one of the most star-studded starting fives in the league on a franchise that hasn't lifted a trophy since 1983. In practice, the guy who runs their offense is publicly begging for no egos. A respected insider is picking under on wins. A former teammate who experienced LeBron's Cleveland Superteam firsthand isn't convinced either. And even the guys defending the fit on the big podcast admit somebody's got to step back who's rarely had to before. That's not a championship lock. That's an experiment with a 2-year expiration date. LeBron is chasing one more championship with his career clock ticking louder than ever, and the people raising the biggest questions about it, from Windhorst's win projection to Shumpert's chemistry concerns, just told you out loud on camera that it might not add up in time. So go drop your real number in the comments. How many games does this team actually win? And let's see who was right when the standings settle in April.